Welcome back to part 14 on our road to Mythic Plus title. In today's episode, we'll be picking up where we left off and running through some more keys, but before that, I have something rather embarrassing to admit. To set the stage, we're going to watch a 29 throne I did during the Tyrannical, Storming, and Raging affixes. Okay, so far so good, nothing out of the ordinary, but those of you that saw last week's episode might notice I'm starting with the same affix set that last week's video left off with. In the last episode, after timing a 28 Blackrook, I had mentioned that apart from having back-to-back-to-back Ataldazar depletes, there was nothing else really interesting that happened, nor did we time any keys that gave us any score. So, part of that statement is false. I lied to you, because as it turns out, we're going to time our very first plus 29 in Throne of the Tides. I'm kidding, this key is fucking insane. Except, we actually did time a couple more keys this week. But the embarrassing thing here is that I've lost the footage of these keys. So unfortunately, I'm unable to show you the timed 27 Darkheart and 28 Fall we managed to pull off. So moving into the new week with Fortified, Entangling, and Bolstering, our rating has jumped from 3520 to 3535. And unfortunately, this isn't the only rating skip in today's episode. For whatever reason, around this time I lost a lot of footage. I'm not sure how it happened, but I'll do my best to fill in those gaps. So bear with me, let's get into it. We're starting things off with some Mythic Firec prog, where I'm playing Subtlety. I had mentioned last episode after a 28 Tyrannical Galakron's Fall that I had wanted to learn how to play sub better. Well, there's no better time to learn than the end boss of the raid, which may sound questionable, but at this point we're still working on phase 1 mechanics and we haven't progged to a point that my damage really matters, so because we're spending hundreds of pulls on this fight, it's genuinely a good time to improve my sub rogue. And we continue with it after raid, setting some lower level keys as Subtlety. Shout out to the monk Galisard and our tank Fellflames. The three of us really worked those training dummies while sitting in queue for a plus 20 fall. Looking at this week's affixes, they are brutal. Fortified plus Bolstering has to be one of the most cursed combinations in all of Mythic Plus. And I mean, I could just not play and wait until next week, but my take on it is that I don't think I played a level that affixes are the difference between my ability to time keys or not. Like, yes, this set of affixes absolutely adds an additional layer of difficulty to some already pretty difficult keys. But the reason I'm depleting keys this week is more likely because of individual mistakes than it is the affix set, in the sense that we're depleting to the dungeon before we're depleting to the affixes. So until I get to a point that I'm like, yeah, I can't play any better, we might as well queue it up. And just as I'm talking about this, the footage you're watching in the background here, this 20 fall, was super weird. So you'll notice that the boomkin on my screen is still at the entrance of the dungeon, except they've been doing damage to this pull. And yeah, that's going to stay the same for this entire key. I've never seen this bug before. I can't really explain it, but on my screen, the boomkin was just not there. And the only way I could actually tell he was in fact there was by looking at the damage meters and when I'd occasionally see him drop his beam somewhere. So that was a little weird, but the first kind of push key we do this week is a 28 Rise, having a ridiculously fast first boss split. Sub 8 minutes is very good here. However, we do lose a chunk of time at the sand section with several deaths, mainly due to loose adds and pulling threat. But after this point, we're going to have a clean Morchi and Battlefield, arriving at the final trash pack with more than enough time to spare. Except, we're going to have a bad time. We lose a few people towards the tail end of Infinite Fury, and running back into this pack is rough, especially with the Dragon bolstered. We do get through it, but it takes us 11 deaths to do so, and now our timer is looking questionable. We pulled Deos with just over 4 minutes remaining, and we timed the key by 14 seconds. Although recently nerfed, Rise is still a super tough dungeon, so we're feeling pretty stoked. And with it, we gained 13 score, pushing our rating total to 3548. From here, we head into a 28 Everbloom, swapping out our Shadow Priest for a Ret Paladin. On the first pull, we proc some very bolstered Berserkers that run around one-shotting our team. So it's a quick run back, and a bit later, we're going to play Gnawroot? Apparently there exists routes that actually play this guy. I mean, it does give a lot of count, but with the way it silences players after rooting them, it's kinda scary trying to play this guy with other mobs. The alternative then, and what we do, is to just single target it down, which definitely doesn't feel great. But this guy does give a decent amount of percent, and it's bolstering, so I can see the argument made in favor of playing it. But while we do pull it off, a bit later while our tank is gathering a caster pull, they're going to fall over and we wipe. So we try it once more, and this time while the tank is going to survive grouping the initial pull, they aren't going to survive the tail end of it. At this point, we don't think the timer is still attainable, so we deplete and run back to 27. And like the previous key, we're going to have a bit of a rough start, as our tank gets one shot by a naturalist with 10 stacks of bolstering. And then a bit later, we have a couple deaths to threat on Witherbark. We send both our battle reses to get them back up, but after this point, the run goes pretty smooth, and we play well enough to time the key just under the timer. I've already done this one on a 27, so we don't get any score here, but we're back later in the week for a 28 Darkheart. In this run, we play all the trash up to the first bear, which is absolutely terrifying on bolstering. We see why pretty quick, as both the warrior and I get one-tapped by some cats. Thankfully, we're barely able to kill off the bear before its third maddening roar to get through the pull. And this kinda sets the theme of this key, because we're going to average something like 1 death per pull, which isn't ideal, but they're recoverable deaths, and we're able to keep things together well enough to the point that we actually manage to time this key, netting us +1 rating and pushing our score to 3571. And I know what you're thinking. Shindigs, you were 3548 in the previous keystone. What's going on here? Well, remember what I said about losing some of the footage? Yeah, so unfortunately, that includes this stretch of keys. But thanks to Raider.io, I can tell you a little bit about them. The first time key we did was a 28 fall. I had just been pugging keys when I managed to land myself in a double rogue Warlock comp. An interesting combination, but we beat the timer by a few minutes. And from there, went and timed a 28 Darkheart. I had already done a 28 fall on Tyran, but the Darkheart was my first 28 in that dungeon, so combined, this got us something like 13 rating. The following day then, a tank I had played with before asked if I wanted to come run some keys. So I linked up for a 28 Blackrook that we timed. I had already done a 28 Blackrook, so we don't get any score from this one, but timing it turned into a 29 Atal. So we jump straight in, but unfortunately we deplete and the tank has to dip out. So the remaining 4 of us scooped up another tank, and we managed to time the now 28 Atal. This was my first 28 in the dungeon, so it got us about 9 rating points, pushing our score total to 3570. And now that we're caught back up to speed, we'll take a short look at this Waycrest that's been going on, because it does not go well. And I could spend some time pointing out the mistakes here, but we make a lot of them, so I'll keep it short and say that after 30 deaths, we figure we're out of time and call GG's. From here, we're going to pug into and attempt a bunch of throne runs. But this dungeon has to be the hardest in combination with bolstering. In most of these runs, we don't make it much further than the first few pulls. And that's it for the week. The following reset, we crack open the vault to find nothing remarkable, so we pick out a socket. I haven't been showing vault super consistently, because at this point, there isn't a whole lot I can get that would be an upgrade. Things I'm specifically looking for would be a Myth Track Nick of Time, or any Myth Track Outlaw Trinket. Kicking off this set of keys, we link back up with the boys Fell Flames and for a 28 Blackrook. The affixes this week are Tyran, Incorporeal, and Spiteful, which is a great affix set, hence it's a big week to push some keys. Except that during the first boss, I have a rather sad death to Soul Echoes. The way I used to handle this mechanic was to drop 3 circles, then move to a new spot, drop 3 more, and then move again. This way, I would limit the amount of ground clutter for the rest of my party. except it doesn't work when I lose count. From here, we have a largely clean run until attempting the Fell Dom skip. While I can shroud the section, it's a pretty sketchy skip. The bats can aggro people out of stealth, and without additional movement speed, it's a pretty tight window to make it the full distance. This unfortunately gets the better of us as we rack up a few deaths here. But thankfully, the healer makes it through, so we mass res and blast through the rest of the key. From here, we link up with the Shadow Priest and Resto Shaman for a 28 Atal Jazar, where we casually pull a deathless run and absolutely blast this key. I do think it's slightly less impressive when compared to the Natty Pug Everbloom done in the last episode, but still pretty sweet. We then head into a 28 Rise, where after chaining into the Lizard, a Magus we left behind is going to get a volley off, which takes me out. A little while later then, we lose our Shadow Priest to the first boss, but that's the worst of this first section, and we down tier at around the 9-minute mark. Which is okay, I guess? But then during the Sandy area, our tank goes down and we rack up a few deaths. From this point, however, the rest of the dungeon goes smooth until our Shadow Priest gets auto-attacked by the 3-pack before the final boss. This was a slight scare, but thankfully it's Tyrant week, so we're able to play through it. We pulled Deus with just over 4 minutes remaining, so it's gonna be close. And on the second ad, I'm going to eat a melee and go down. My fault on this one, I had tricks available and should have used it. We get battle res back up when the following goes down. Painting.
Oh, the other one's still alive.
It's dead now. Fine.
What? You gotta cloak that, I think? Yeah.
Oh. Paint's up. Should live this.
What?
We were soaking one for too long, I think.
And we deplete. On my death, I hadn't realized I had the Chronal Burn debuff until it was too late. And then we get triple orbs after our Shaman lingers in one a little too long. Afterwards, we opt to send a 28 Throne. We have a fairly clean go of the early trash, but run into some problems on the first boss. Our first death comes to the geysers following Shock Blast, as our Shaman goes down. To be fair, I've died the exact same way before. It can be kinda tricky locating the ground effects if you're the one targeted by Shock Blast. Our next death then comes during Focus Tempest, because Bing Chillin and I are a little too close to one another. So my Tempest hit chains to him, and he then dies to the next hit. I BRS him back up, but then he's gonna go down once more to a melee during the intermission. Luckily, since our Shaman used Ankh, we have another battle res available, so we get him up and finish the fight. From here, we take out the second boss, playing one of the caster packs on top of it. This can sometimes get sketchy, especially when we're forced to move for Bubbling Fissure, but in this case, our tank drops Silent Sigil and the pack then moves with us. After which point, we're able to kill off the trash pack and the rest of the encounter goes smoothly. From here, we head over to the third boss, when we lose our tank to Shadow Smash. We have a couple more deaths, but we kite it out and keep the pool alive. We then take out Totem Man and make our way to the final trash pack of the dungeon. But the timer is looking tight. To save time, we take the Corruption ads into the double sentry pool while our healer has no mana, which is not good. Somehow we run back and keep the pool going, but at this point the damage has been done and we aren't able to beat the timer. We decide to send one final key for the night, and this time it's a 29 fall. We're going to pull a bunch of trash onto the first boss, but it's a little bit too much for our tank to handle as they're going to fall over and we wipe. So we run it back, but now I don't have Shroud available to skip the first section, so we're forced to play this trash. After we get through it, we play the remaining 2 Rippers onto the boss and eventually we get Chronicar down. But this is a pretty slow split, so we're going to need to keep things pretty clean from here if we hope to have a shot at making the timer. And almost immediately, things go awry when our tank dies to a dog and we rack up a bunch of deaths. This would prove to be the nail in the coffin, because while we play out the rest of the key, by the time we make it to Iridicron, we don't have enough time left. However, we're already this deep, so we decide to send an attempt. and I spec swapped to subtlety. At this point, I've had a good chunk of practice with sub in raid, so I was excited to get an attempt on a Ridicron in a high tyrannical key. But on the first group soak, we lose our Shadow Priest, so I go to battle res them, when I realize my subtlety gear doesn't include my NG bracers. Thankfully, the tank has a pair and gets them back up. I think I play the fight fine, but our priest dies later during another group soak, and going into a fresh Earth Surge phase, our healer is pretty ooh. So we don't get topped, and I then also go down. We have a couple battle reses available, so we try to salvage the pull when this happens.
Alright.
I don't know if it's
Wait,
safe.
I don't think it's safe. I think it's safe now. You insta died.
I'm so bad at the game.
Fuck, that was my bad. I called it out a long time.
This time, we are hard out of combat reses, and that's all she wrote. The following day then, we link up with some of the guys I timed the 28 Atal with earlier in the week for a 28 Darkheart. And in this group, we actually had both a 28 and a 29 Darkheart, so we've got a few chances here to get the time. In attempt 1, things go okay. We have a few deaths throughout the key, but our first major time loss comes during the second boss, where our Havoc Demon Hunter dashes into a root. And since they aren't topped going into Shattered Earth, they die. Our healer also goes down to what I assume was them attempting to keep the DH alive. We get the healer back up, but we don't have another battle res, so we have to 4-man the rest of the fight. From here, we're going to jump to the last boss, as we engage Xavius with 4.5 minutes remaining. I think this is winnable, until we lose our Pally to a Swirly, and then our Demon Hunter to a Nightmare Bolt. We're out of time, but now that we've done a full clear of the dungeon, we're in a good spot to run back the 29. Except during the first boss, our tank goes down and so does everyone else. So we reset the instance for a second try at the 28, and this time it's not just a few deaths at the start, it's several. And I'm guessing with the lack of DPS, we probably aren't killing things at a pace our tank can live through, so eventually they're gonna fold and so does everyone else. We run it back and try to play on, but while gathering, we lose our tank once more, and that's a second full wipe. We don't try again, so that is GG. I take a break here, but a little while later, I manage to plug into a 27 Everbloom, which goes super clean until the third boss, when our monk butt pulls the Pyromancer at the exact time we pull the boss. So that's a double Cinderbolt volley, which we are not surviving. From here, I link back up with some friends and we send several keys, timing a bunch, but none of them get us any additional rating. And a little while later then, I decide to queue up my keystone, which had become a 29 Waycrest at some point. But here, I make a bad decision, before the key even starts. I wasn't recording it, but the Prop Pally, Havoc Demon Hunter, and Mage queued up as a 3-pack with way higher IO than everyone else. By LFG standards, they were more than qualified to be in this key, but I didn't take them right away. And the Mage then whispers me, "Why don't you take us?" or something along those lines, which should have been an immediate red flag. In my experience, anyone that whispers asking you to take them, firstly, it just sounds desperate, and usually these people don't play well. But because they were so highly rated, I gave in and took them. And well, we brick this key pretty fast. First, our tank DCs and we wipe. Then when they come back, our monk dies to... I'm not sure what exactly. And without them healing, the tank then dies and we wipe again. We run it back once more, but our tank goes down for a third time. To be fair to the tank, I could have shivved the Thornguard to remove the enrage. At this point, I wasn't aware it could be shivved, but with this set of deaths, we call things there. Despite the disappointing key, I do want to shout out our healer Emery. Turns out they've been following the series, so that was cool. Afterwards, I reformed the group with the tank I sent the Darkhearts with, and we run back the 28 Waycrest. But we have to reset the boss after our tank and Ret Pal go down. So we head over to Ra while waiting for Lust, and on our second attempt, our priest is out of position and gets meleeed by the fire dudes. Luckily, we've done enough and finished the fight. But at this point, the timer's looking kinda suspect. And we're not going to make it too much further, because in a last-ditch effort to try and make up some time, we pulled a Soul Charmer and some trash onto Lord and Lady Waycrest, but we're not able to survive. Somebody else had a 27 Everbloom, so we tried that with the same group, but during the second boss, right after we killed Telu, our tank goes down. Our pally is quick with the B-res, but they get meleeed before it can go off, and we wipe. That's key. We opt to run back my 27 Waycrest, but the mage dips out, so we bring in and absolutely blast this key, nearly hitting the 2 chest. We proc 1 point here as well, so that's a dub. And with this time, my keystone turns into a 28 Dark Heart. We're having a fairly clean run leading up to Draceron, when my power goes out. So needless to say, we do not time. But the next day, we're back with working power and we queue into another 28 Dark Heart. For this one, we're jumping to the second boss, as we're going to lose our Shadow Priest to a Shattered Earth cast. I run over to battle res them back up, but some roots spawn on me, and unfortunately our priest takes the battle res in the roots. We get them up once more, but then we lose our questionably named monk to some ads, and that's key. Not too long later though, we're back in another Dark Heart thicket. And we're off to a scary start, as we have one of the most sketchy first boss kills I've ever seen. And while the split isn't great, we play on. But heading into the final boss, we're definitely short on time. So, we try this. Yo, that is fucking crazy. Yeah, we had to. I was definitely not expecting the trash onto boss play, but we actually almost pulled it off, which is kind of crazy. We're gonna brick one more 27 Dark Heart before jumping into a 28 Rise with an all too familiar face. But you know what? I'm down for some second chances. And to be fair, they play the start of this key pretty damn well. But during the first boss, our mage is out of position for a frontal bait, which turns us around for the intermission phase such that we let one too many orbs go through. And that's key. Now, we are going to send one more key for the week with a 27 Everbloom, but this is yet another VOD that was lost to the void, that we actually managed to time. It was kind of funny. The priest PI'd our tank on a few pulls because the rest of us DPS were all target capped. Timing it gets us another 4 rating, which pushes our score to 3581. That rounds out our keys for the week, and with it, we're going to end the episode there. Thanks for watching, be sure to like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you in the next one.